The United States military has announced it has successfully tested a low-cost bomb that can sink ships the size of aircraft carriers. Bringing in former British Colonel Hamish to Bretton-Gordon now to discuss this. Hamish, how significant is this development?
Well, I think on its own, it is probably not hugely significant, but in the round with other things, it probably is. And necessity is always the mother of invention, and that is very much increased in times of conflict and war. So the Americans announcing this, and people would find it rather strange. Why the Americans announcing some magic new bomb that can destroy aircraft carriers rather than keeping it quiet? Well, I think, again, to quote the great Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu, the art of warfare is actually to win without fighting. And I think this event is very much focused at the Chinese, who have developed the biggest maritime fleet in the world now and are launching their third massive aircraft carrier. If the Chinese now believe that these are redundant, then it changes the dynamic around the place. But we've seen it with a whole host of weapons, certainly around Ukraine as well. We talked before about Dragonfire, the laser-guided weapon that could take out expensive drones. And only last week, the British government announced that they had a much smaller version of Dragonfire, which is a laser that would be on tanks that would take out drones. So I think it's a shot across the bows, to use that vernacular, for the Chinese Navy, that all their great investment in capital ships and aircraft carriers is not going to give them a significant advantage over the Americans. So it's part of development that we see all the time in warfare, very much quicker in warfare that really we're in at the moment with what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in the Middle East, and no doubt will continue, and no doubt in a few years' time the Chinese and others will have a counter to it.
But why is this development a worry for the Royal Navy? Why would it be more consequential for Britain over America?
Well, I think it's a numbers game. The Americans have 10 plus big aircraft carriers, and Britain, for some reason, decided to invest in two massive aircraft carriers a few years ago, costing billions and billions of pounds. When actually, when you look at what is required for the defence of the United Kingdom, you wouldn't put aircraft carriers right up there. And I welcome the new government having a defence review, because we need an army, an air force, and a navy that is of its time to protect the United Kingdom now, not perhaps 10 years ago when people thought that we were still going to be on the high seas in the South China Seas and would need aircraft carriers. I think it's important to note that when we thought we needed an aircraft carrier 6 months ago to launch attacks on the Houthis, who were attacking Allied shipping in the Red Sea, we used Cyprus, which has always been Britain's best aircraft carrier. So I think these things are very vulnerable. We need in this country to focus on the defence of these islands and the defence of our allies in Europe. And actually, the very expensive aircraft carriers, which we don't seem to have enough aircraft to man anyway, the ability for them to be taken out very cheaply with a single weapon shows their vulnerability. So if I was writing the defence review for the new government, I would not include these aircraft carriers, because I think their time is spent, as it were.
Hamish, it seems right now there's this urgency for Western countries like the US and the UK to be ramping up their investment in newer, stronger, modernised technology to produce better weapons to compete. Is this kind of attributed to China's desire to make the best military in the world?
Well, it's certainly in reaction to our likely adversaries. And absolutely, China is spending a fortune on ships, on aircraft, and everything else to wage war. So the really harsh lesson we're learning with Putin is that we must have a credible defense. When Putin looked west in February 2022, he didn't see a credible deterrent, conventional deterrent. And that is because the peace dividend, we and I think everybody else in NATO completely overspent it. and reduced our force to a degree. So, the investment in technology is certainly a good thing, and we must do. But we must not forget also history. The main reason that the Nazis lost the Second World War is they focused too much on technology and not enough on mass, on numbers. And I expect a lot of people are surprised that actually it was the Allies' numbers that defeated the Nazis in 1945, not technology. The Nazis just built 1,300 very, very highly technical tanks, the Tiger I, but they were completely overwhelmed by 49,000 simple American tanks called Shermans. So, that is something that we need to consider. But certainly, we need to be well aware that we need to have a credible defense against the Russians and the Chinese and terror groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, Al Qaeda, and ISIS.
Hey, Mr. Bretton-Gordon, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.